There's something uniquely soul-crushing about watching your wife passionately kiss another man while you sit in your 7-year-old Subaru clutching a turkey avocado wrap that's getting sweatier than the two of them. Even better when that man is her personal trainer, who, upon noticing your car, drops her hand like he's suddenly remembered he's allergic to wedding rings. Welcome to my Tuesday afternoon epiphany. I just sat there, sandwich slowly disintegrating in my grip, thinking, so this is what rock bottom looks like. It has a protein shake bar and monthly membership fees. I'm Quentin Mitchell, 38, professional IT manager, and apparently professional cuckold of Minneapolis, Minnesota. That bombshell blonde in the matching Lululemon set is Bristol, my wife of 10 years. The walking protein supplement advertisement dropping her hand like a hot coal is Lawson, her personal trainer, who's clearly offering services well beyond the scope of Planet Fitness's standard package. The funny part? This wasn't even the shock it should have been. It was more like the final puzzle piece clicking into place after months of evening training sessions, mysterious text messages, and Bristol suddenly developing an interest in fitness that bordered on religious devotion. For a woman who once called walking from the couch to the fridge her cardio, this transformation had raised more red flags than a Soviet parade. 3 weeks ago, I'd installed a tracking device and microphones in her Lexus, the one I pay for, by the way. Call it paranoid, call it invasion of privacy, I prefer to call it evidence collection. Because while trust is a beautiful thing, confirmation is even better, especially when you've been married for a decade and have a house in Maple Grove with a mortgage that makes me weep monthly. My first instinct was to honk the horn, maybe throw the sad sandwich at them. You know, really lean into the cliché of the outraged husband. The guys from my Thursday night poker group would have advised something dramatically satisfying. Derek would suggest confronting them publicly. Make a scene, bro, film it for TikTok. Troy would recommend something involving Lawson's car and a baseball bat. Classic Troy, solving problems like it's still 2005 and we're characters in a Martin Scorsese film. Instead, I did something far more terrifying. I waited. I started the car, pulled out of the parking lot, and drove to my office like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just witnessed the death of my marriage in between a GNC and a Jamba Juice. See, here's what Bristol doesn't know about me. Behind this dad bod and sensible wardrobe is the mind of a tactical genius. Okay, maybe genius is stretching it, but I did once orchestrate a server migration that my boss called surprisingly competent, so I have credentials. While Bristol thinks I'm just the guy who asks if she's tried turning her phone off and on again when it glitches, I've actually been 3 steps ahead of her affair for weeks. The GPS tracker shows her car regularly parked at Lawson's apartment complex on Monday and Thursday afternoons. The audio recordings have captured conversations that would make a reality TV producer blush. And yet, I've been bringing her protein shakes after her workouts, asking about her fitness journey, and nodding sympathetically when she complains about muscle soreness. Oscar-worthy, really. Last week, we celebrated our 10-year anniversary at Olive Garden. Her choice, not mine, which should have been the first red flag all those years ago. I raised my glass of mediocre Chianti and toasted to honesty and new beginnings. She clinked glasses with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, completely unaware that earlier that day I had finalized the transfer of substantial assets she never knew existed. My inheritance from Grandpa Mitchell, wisely kept in a separate account, along with the emergency fund I'd been building for years, safely relocated to new accounts she couldn't touch. Because while I may look like the type of guy who keeps all his passwords in a document labeled passwords, I'm actually slightly more sophisticated than that. To many more years, she said, twirling pasta around her fork. To getting exactly what we deserve, I replied. The irony was so thick you could spread it on the unlimited breadsticks. Here's another fun fact about Bristol that she probably shared with Lawson during their post-workout protein shake dates. She's terrible with finances. In 10 years of marriage, she's never once checked our investment portfolio, understood our tax returns, or questioned why my annual bonus never seemed to fully materialize in our joint account. She trusted me completely with our financial life, while apparently trusting Lawson completely with parts of our marriage vows. That's the problem with cheaters. They're so focused on covering one type of betrayal that they leave themselves vulnerable to others. The next morning, after the parking lot spectacle, I kissed her goodbye like nothing had happened. Have a great workout today, honey. Really crush those glutes. Thanks, babe, she said, already texting someone who I was fairly certain wasn't her mother. I went to work, had lunch with our family lawyer under the guise of updating our wills, and laid out exactly what I knew and what I planned to do about it. Harold, who has seen enough divorces to become legally jaded, actually slow-clapped at the end of my presentation. "Most guys come in here crying or raging," he said, straightening his bow tie. "You brought spreadsheets and audio files organized by date. It's almost refreshing." "I'm in IT," I shrugged. "Documenting disasters is literally in my job description." The plan was simple. Continue the charade for exactly 2 more weeks while Harold prepared everything. Continue being the oblivious, slightly pathetic husband, bringing her smoothies and asking about her fitness goals. Continue pretending I didn't know that her girls' night out last month had actually been a weekend at a cabin with Lawson, or that the yoga workshop she attended was actually at the apartment of the instructor, a man named Soren with man-bun ambitions and apparently no qualms about married women, because Bristol wasn't just having an affair, she was having several. The GPS data showed a pattern that would make an air traffic controller dizzy. Between Lawson, Soren, and what sounded like a neighbor from her gym, apartment 304, based on conversations I'd recorded, my wife was certainly getting her cardio in one way or another. All that was left was the meeting with the lawyers, scheduled for next Wednesday at 2 p.m. The conference room was booked, the evidence was compiled, the financial preparations were complete. And Bristol had absolutely no idea what was coming. As I sat in my office that afternoon, staring at the calendar and counting down the days, I couldn't help but smile. In the world of personal training, they say the most important part of any workout is the proper form. In my world, the world of husbands being cheated on by wives who think they married a pushover, the most important part is the follow-through. And my follow-through was about to be impeccable. The beauty of being underestimated is that no one sees you coming. In the 2 days following my front row seat to Bristol's parking lot passion play, I perfected the art of strategic obliviousness. I became the husband equivalent of those inflatable tube men outside car dealerships. Lots of enthusiastic movement, zero substance. "How was your workout today, hun?" "Your glutes look amazing," I'd say, while secretly checking the GPS tracker showing her car had been parked at Lawson's apartment complex for 3 hours. 3 hours for a leg day session. Unless her legs were behind her ears, that time frame seemed excessive. "Thanks, babe. Lawson says I'm making incredible progress," she'd respond, somehow managing to keep a straight face. Give the woman an Emmy. Her ability to mention her lover's name without a hint of irony deserved some kind of recognition. Bristol had developed this habit of dropping Lawson's fitness wisdom into casual conversation, like he was some philosopher king of protein shakes, rather than the guy violating my marriage vows, and probably every ethical code in the personal trainer handbook. Lawson says processed carbs are basically poison. Lawson recommends activated charcoal after a night of drinking. Lawson believes marriage is just a social construct. Okay, she never actually said that last one, but it was heavily implied when she started scheduling training sessions on our anniversary. That Thursday, my poker group gathered in Derek's basement man cave, a temple to mediocre beer, Minnesota Vikings memorabilia, and escape from domestic reality. These guys had been my sanity preservers through job changes, home renovations, and now, apparently, the spectacular immolation of my marriage. "You're seriously not going to confront her?" Troy asked, arranging his chips with the precision of someone who watched too many poker tournaments, but never quite grasped the strategy. "If Heather was cheating on me, I'd go nuclear." "That would require Heather to find you interesting enough to cheat on," said Marcus, our resident divorcee and therefore self-appointed relationship expert. "Besides, Quentin's playing it smart, strategic." I nodded, taking a pull from my beer. "Gentlemen, have you ever watched those nature documentaries where the predator waits for the perfect moment? That's me right now. A snow leopard in khakis and sensible shoes. More like a sloth with a spreadsheet," Derek laughed, dealing the cards. "Mock all you want, but while Bristol thinks I'm at boring poker night, I've been documenting every minute of her extracurricular activities." I pulled out my phone and showed them the tracker app. "See this stop at 3:45 p.m. today? That's not Planet Fitness. That's Soren's downtown apartment, Mr. Man-Bun yoga instructor." Their collective "Damn" echoed around the basement like we were teenagers discovering contraband. "You've got audio recordings too?" Marcus asked, suddenly interested. His divorce had been messier than a toddler eating spaghetti and considerably more expensive. Perfectly legal in Minnesota with one-party consent. My car, my consent. I smiled thinly. Would you like to hear Bristol explaining to her friend Tessa how Lawson has awakened parts of her that have been sleeping for years? Troy nearly choked on his beer. Bro, that's ice cold. It gets better. Last week she told Tessa that I wouldn't know passion if it filed an IT support ticket. I arranged my cards finding a pair of twos. Garbage hand appropriate for the garbage situation. Meanwhile, I'm building a case that would make a divorce attorney weep with joy. The irony wasn't lost on me. For 10 years, Bristol had dismissed my career as boring, my hobbies as dull, my conversation as tedious. She'd roll her eyes at my computer talk, zone out when I explained network security, all while I was using those exact skills to document her betrayal with military precision. Friday morning, Bristol announced she was going to a wellness retreat for the weekend with her gym friends. That sounds great, honey. You deserve some self-care time, I said, sipping coffee and scrolling through emails. What I didn't mention was that I had already seen the Airbnb confirmation forwarded to her email. A cabin by Lake Minnetonka with one king-sized bed reserved under Lawson Fletcher's name. A wellness retreat for 2, apparently. So you're sure you don't mind? She asked, her expression a fascinating mix of guilt and relief. Of course not. Maybe I'll finally have time to organize the garage. What I actually planned to do was meet with Harold again to finalize our strategy and perhaps enjoy a weekend without the Olympic-level mental gymnastics required to pretend my marriage wasn't a smoldering crater. As she packed her overnight bag, noticeably heavier on lingerie than yoga pants, I offered to help carry it to the car. You're the best, Quentin, she said, kissing my cheek. I know, I replied with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. Everyone keeps underestimating me. She laughed like I'd made a joke. With Bristol gone, I spent Friday evening going through our home office, systematically collecting and copying financial documents. It was amazing what you could find when you actually looked. Credit card statements showing purchases at boutiques I'd never heard of, restaurant charges for meals I'd never eaten, hotel bills for stays I'd never enjoyed. The financial infidelity matched the physical. Consistent, brazen, and apparently multi-party. Saturday morning I met Harold at his office. At his age, Harold viewed weekend work as a refuge from his wife's social calendar, which apparently consisted entirely of craft fairs and visiting grandchildren. Your wife has been busy, he said, reviewing the credit card statements. Very busy indeed. Tell me about it. The woman's schedule makes an air traffic controller look underemployed. Harold removed his glasses, polishing them thoughtfully. The good news, Quentin, is that Minnesota courts take financial misconduct very seriously in divorce proceedings. These unauthorized expenditures on, let's call them extracurricular activities, will work strongly in our favor. What about the separate accounts, the ones she doesn't know about? Harold's smile would have made a shark back away slowly. Perfectly legal. Morally questionable, perhaps, but then again, so is training every muscle group except marital fidelity. Sunday evening, Bristol returned looking suspiciously relaxed for someone who'd supposedly spent the weekend in downward dog and meditation. The faint hickey at the base of her neck suggested positions considerably more advanced than anything in the yoga manual. How was the retreat? I asked, helping with her bag, which was noticeably lighter coming home. Less need for lingerie on the return trip, I supposed. Amazing, she gushed. I feel completely rejuvenated. You certainly look satisfied, I noted, watching her flush slightly. Did you do a lot of deep stretching? So much stretching, she agreed, missing my sarcasm entirely. Soren was there too. He led some incredible guided meditations. 2 of them? At the cabin meant for Lawson. This was getting interesting. Either she was getting sloppy with her lies, or the wellness retreat had been more inclusive than advertised. That's wonderful, I said. I'm glad you're finding such fulfilling friendships at the gym. Monday morning brought an unexpected twist. As I was leaving for work, Bristol's phone pinged with a text. She glanced at it, and her face performed an impressive journey from shock to panic to forced neutrality. Everything okay? I asked, keys in hand. Fine, she said too quickly. Just Tessa being dramatic. I nodded and left, but checked the tracker as soon as I got to my car. Within 20 minutes, Bristol's Lexus was heading downtown. Not to Planet Fitness, not to Lawson's, but to the Hennepin County Courthouse. Interesting. A quick call to Harold confirmed my suspicion. Bristol had apparently consulted with a divorce attorney of her own. Not just any attorney, but Caroline Walsh, nicknamed the Wood Chipper for her ability to turn husbands into financial mulch. "She's making a preemptive move," Harold said, sounding almost impressed. "She must be planning to file soon." I laughed, surprising even myself with how hollow it sounded. "She thinks she's got it all figured out, doesn't she? The cheating husband who works too much, the neglected wife finding comfort elsewhere. That would be my guess. It's a common strategy." "Too bad for Bristol," I said, pulling into my office parking lot. Wednesday's meeting is going to be quite the reality check. The countdown was on. 48 hours until Bristol's carefully constructed narrative came crashing down around her designer yoga pants. 48 hours until she discovered exactly who she'd been underestimating all these years. And I couldn't wait. Tuesday morning dawned with the kind of perfect fall weather that Minnesota showcases in tourism brochures. Crisp air, golden sunlight, leaves turning brilliant shades of red and orange. The kind of day that makes you forget momentarily that your wife is sleeping with half the fitness professionals in Hennepin County. I was pouring my second cup of coffee when Bristol appeared in the kitchen, dressed in workout clothes that cost more than my monthly car payment. "I'm meeting with some clients this afternoon, so I might be late," I said casually, watching her reaction over the rim of my mug. "Oh." She barely looked up from her phone. "That's fine. I have a nutrition consultation with Lawson anyway." "Is that what the kids are calling it these days? A nutrition consultation?" I imagined Lawson, with his tribal tattoos and vocabulary limited primarily to protein-related words, attempting to explain nutrition. The man probably thought the food pyramid was an Egyptian tourist attraction. "Great," I smiled. "Hope you learn something stimulating." She missed the sarcasm entirely, which was becoming our relationship's defining characteristic. I headed to the office, but my client meeting was actually a final strategy session with Harold. As I walked through the Skyway system, connecting downtown Minneapolis buildings, I checked my phone. Bristol's Lexus was parked at her lawyer's office again. The pieces were moving faster than I'd anticipated. Harold was waiting in his corner office with a view of the Mississippi River. At 67, with salt and pepper hair and bow ties that should have gone out of style decades ago, he looked like Central Casting's idea of a distinguished attorney. "Caroline filed the paperwork this morning," he said without preamble. "Bristol is planning to initiate divorce proceedings tomorrow, claiming emotional abandonment, irreconcilable differences, and—" He paused for dramatic effect. "Infidelity on your part." I nearly spat out my coffee. "She's accusing me of cheating. That's rich. According to my source in Caroline's office, Bristol claims you've been having an affair with someone at work." Meredith Johnson?" The name hit me like a bucket of ice water. Meredith was our IT department's project manager. Brilliant, professional, and happily married to her wife of 5 years. "Meredith is a lesbian," I said flatly, "and one of my best friends at work." Harold nodded, which Bristol either doesn't know or doesn't care about. "She's building a narrative, emotionally absent husband, throwing himself into work, finding comfort with a colleague, while she's auditioning for the Adultery Olympics." I shook my head, a cold realization settling in my stomach. "This isn't just about Lawson and Soren, is it? She's been planning this for months." Harold slid a folder across the desk. "Based on the financial trails, I'd say yes. Large cash withdrawals, a safety deposit box opened 6 months ago, and a consultation with Caroline back in July. The affairs might be recreational, but the divorce is strategic." Something clicked. The house refinancing she pushed for last year. She kept saying we could get a better rate, but I couldn't figure out why she suddenly cared about mortgage details. "Let me guess. She insisted on being added to the deed?" Harold raised an eyebrow. "Exactly. My grandfather's initial down payment had kept the house in my name only, a detail that had never mattered until Bristol's sudden interest in real estate finance." I laughed, a short, humorless sound. All this time, I thought I was collecting evidence on her affairs, but she's been setting me up for financial slaughter. "The good news," Harold said, leaning back in his chair, "is that we're one step ahead. The bad news is, we need to move our timeline up. Today." "Today?" My carefully constructed plan was unraveling. "But the meeting is tomorrow. And if we wait until tomorrow, Bristol's narrative becomes the official record. We need to file first, present our evidence first, and control the story." He checked his watch. "I can have everything ready by 3 p.m. As Harold made calls and his assistant prepared paperwork, I sat by the window, watching boats on the river, and contemplating how thoroughly I'd misread my marriage. Not just Bristol's affairs, that part I'd figured out, but the calculated nature of her exit strategy. I pulled out my phone and called Meredith. "Hey Q," she answered. "Please tell me the network isn't down again." "Not a work call," I said. "More of a, my wife is trying to destroy me and is using you as collateral damage kind of call." There was a pause. "I'm going to need some context." By the time I finished explaining, Meredith was both furious and determined to help. As our department's most organized person, her project timelines were things of terrifying beauty. She immediately volunteered to pull together evidence of our professional relationship, emails, meeting schedules, project documentation, all proving we worked together but were definitely not having an affair. "I'll even get Janet to write a statement," she said, referring to her wife. "No offense, but you're not really my type, being male and all." "I'm crushed," I replied, feeling the first genuine smile of the day. "But thank you." By 2:30 p.m., we had assembled a counter-offensive that would make military strategists weep with pride. Harold had filed our divorce petition, complete with evidence of Bristol's multiple affairs, financial misconduct, and attempts to manipulate property ownership. Meredith had provided a sworn statement addressing the false allegations, supported by her wife. I had transferred the last of my separate funds to new accounts and changed all passwords to systems Bristol might access. The final piece came from an unexpected source. During my evidence gathering, I discovered something on the Lexus audio recordings that initially seemed irrelevant. Bristol complaining to Tessa about her brother Nash's gambling debts. Nash, who happened to be a real estate agent, the same Nash who had handled our refinancing, pushing unusually hard for my signature on the deed modification. A quick background check confirmed my suspicion. Nash had a history of financial problems and had been temporarily suspended by the real estate board last year. The timing aligned perfectly with Bristol's sudden interest in our home equity. Family conspiracy. Harold nodded appreciatively when I showed him the connection. Caroline will have a hard time explaining that away. At 3:15 p.m., as I sat in Harold's office watching him submit the final paperwork electronically, my phone buzzed with a text from Bristol. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up for dinner." I checked the tracker. Her car was parked at a downtown hotel, not Lawson's apartment, not Soren's place somewhere new. The final performance in her infidelity tour, perhaps. Or a strategic meeting with her brother and lawyer. Either way, it no longer mattered. The wheels of justice were turning, and for once they were turning in my favor. "It's done," Harold said, closing his laptop. "Bristol and Caroline will be served first thing tomorrow morning. I suggest you don't go home tonight." I nodded, having already booked a room at a different downtown hotel, one with excellent security and a great whiskey selection. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now?" Harold smiled like a chess master who just spotted checkmate 6 moves ahead. "Now we wait for them to realize they're playing a game that's already over." As I left Harold's office, I felt strangely light, as if the weight of pretending had physically lifted. For months, I'd been living a charade, the oblivious husband, the devoted partner, the man too absorbed in work to notice his wife's betrayal. But the truth was both simpler and more complex. I had noticed everything, documented everything, prepared for everything. Bristol thought she was dealing with a predictable IT manager who could be outmaneuvered. She was about to discover she'd been playing chess against someone thinking 3 dimensions ahead. Tomorrow would bring chaos, confrontation, and probably tears. But for tonight I had a hotel room, bourbon on room service speed dial, and the profound satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, just sometimes, the underestimated guy wins. The Hampton Inn, downtown Minneapolis, isn't exactly the Ritz-Carlton, but when you're hiding from your cheating wife's legal ambush, it offers several key amenities: anonymity, decent soundproofing, and a breakfast buffet that includes both waffle and omelet stations. Small victories. I was on my second waffle Wednesday morning when my phone lit up with a text from Harold. Papers served to Bristol at 8:17 a.m. Caroline served at 8:34 a.m., expecting nuclear meltdown by 9 Kyo. I checked my watch. 8:52 a.m. Right on schedule, my phone erupted with Bristol's incoming call. I sent it to voicemail and took another bite of waffle. She immediately called back. Then again. By the 4th call, I decided the entertainment value outweighed the piece of my breakfast. "Good morning, Bristol," I answered in my best customer service voice. "How's your day going?" What the hell is this? Her voice was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Several hotel guests looked over with expressions ranging from curiosity to sympathy. Divorce papers, adultery claims, GPS tracking? I believe the legal term is discovery, I replied calmly, though checkmate also seems appropriate. You've been spying on me? The outrage in her voice was almost impressive, like a burglar angry about home security cameras. Documenting, I corrected. There's a difference. And before you continue this performance of wounded innocence, perhaps check the evidence files. I particularly recommend audio file 17 from last Thursday, the one where you explained to Tessa how Lawson has revolutionized your understanding of physical satisfaction. Very poetic, by the way. The silence on the other end was so profound, I momentarily thought she'd hung up. You recorded my private conversations? Her voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper. In my car, which I own, which is perfectly legal in Minnesota. I took a sip of coffee. Also, how's the Hyatt downtown? I hear their room service is excellent, though I doubt you ordered much food during your stay last night. Room 718, wasn't it? Another long silence. Then, you're not the man I thought you were. I couldn't help but laugh. That's the first honest thing you've said in months. I'm not the oblivious pushover you thought I married. Surprise. Caroline says your evidence is circumstantial and invasive. We're going to destroy you in court. You mean the Caroline who's currently explaining to the ethics board why she helped you fabricate infidelity claims against me and my lesbian colleague? That Caroline? Because Harold's filing that complaint as we speak. I heard muffled conversation on her end, presumably Bristol conferring with her attorney, whose legal strategy was imploding in real time. We need to talk about this in person, Bristol finally said, her voice shifting to that conciliatory tone she used when trying to manipulate me. Just you and me, Quentin. We can work this out. Absolutely. I'm always open to conversation. How about the conference room at Harold's office at noon? You, me, and our respective legal counsel. Very intimate. This isn't you, Quentin. You're not this calculated. Again, your fundamental misunderstanding of who I am continues to be the theme of our marriage. See you at noon. I hung up and returned to my waffle, which had sadly gone cold during Bristol's meltdown, a small price to pay for the satisfaction of finally dropping the facade. By 11:30, I was sitting in Harold's conference room, reviewing our documentation one last time. The evidence was organized with the precision you'd expect from an IT manager, chronological, cross-referenced, and backed up in triplicate. Nervous? Harold asked, straightening his bow tie. Oddly, no, I replied. I've been playing a role for months. It's almost a relief to finally drop the act. At precisely noon, the receptionist announced Bristol's arrival. She walked in looking like she'd dressed for battle, designer pantsuit, perfect makeup, hair styled to within an inch of its life. Caroline Walsh followed, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the expression of someone who'd just found a scorpion in their shoe. Bristol. Caroline. Harold nodded politely. Please, have a seat. Bristol glared at me across the conference table. Gone was the panic from our phone call, replaced by cold fury. She'd obviously decided offense was her best defense. Let's cut to the chase, Caroline began. These allegations are thoroughly documented, Harold interrupted smoothly, sliding copies of our evidence summary across the table. GPS locations, time-stamped audio recordings, financial records, hotel receipts, credit card statements. Shall I continue? Caroline flipped through the pages, her professional poker face slipping with each turn. This invasion of privacy is completely legal, Harold finished. One-party consent state, vehicles owned solely by Mr. Mitchell, public location tracking. But please continue explaining how Mrs. Mitchell's multiple affairs and financial misconduct are somehow Mr. Mitchell's fault. Bristol hadn't touched the documents. Instead, she stared directly at me. I want the house. I smiled. Interesting opening position, especially considering the evidence on page 43. Your brother Nash's involvement in attempting to fraudulently add you to the deed during refinancing. The real estate board might find that relevant to his recently reinstated license. Bristol's composure cracked slightly. Leave Nash out of this. I'd have been happy to if you hadn't tried to use him to steal my inheritance. Oh, and regarding the inheritance, those accounts you thought you'd access in the divorce, transferred, documented, and protected. Premarital assets remain premarital assets. Caroline leaned over to whisper something to Bristol, whose face went from angry to alarmed. "Here's what's going to happen," Harold said, taking over with the confidence of someone holding 4 aces. "We've prepared a settlement proposal that's actually quite generous, considering the circumstances. Mr. Mitchell keeps the house, his retirement accounts, and his separate assets. Mrs. Mitchell keeps her Lexus, her personal accounts, and receives no alimony. Clean break." "That's absurd," Caroline sputtered. "Minnesota is an equitable distribution state." "Indeed it is," Harold smiled, "and courts take a very dim view of marital misconduct, especially when combined with financial misconduct. Should we proceed to trial, we'll be asking for attorney's fees as well. Or," he slid another document across the table, "we can settle today and avoid airing all these sordid details in open court." The subtext was clear: take the deal or face public humiliation. Bristol finally picked up the evidence summary, flipping to the section detailing her overnight stays. Her face paled slightly at the comprehensive documentation of her extracurricular activities. "You tracked everywhere I went?" she asked quietly. "Not everywhere," I replied. "Just the places you went while lying to me about your whereabouts. The affairs, the lawyer visits, the conspiratorial meetings with your brother. It's amazing what patterns emerge when you actually pay attention." Caroline and Bristol conferred in hushed tones for several minutes. I caught fragments: no-fault state, and financial discovery, and public record, as Caroline apparently explained the reality of their situation. Finally, Bristol looked up. "I want to review the settlement terms." Harold provided the details, and for the next hour we negotiated minor points. Throughout it all, I maintained a calm I didn't know I possessed. The anger that had fueled me for months had transformed into something else. Not indifference exactly, but clarity. By 2:30 p.m. it was done. Bristol signed the settlement agreement with a forceful scribble that nearly tore the paper. Without looking at me again, she stood and walked out, Caroline following with considerably less confidence than they'd entered with. As the door closed behind them, I exhaled slowly. "Congratulations," Harold said. "That went about as well as a divorce can go." "Is it always this anticlimactic?" I asked. Harold laughed. "Trust me, this was the legal equivalent of a spectacular explosion. Most divorces are messy, prolonged battles of attrition. You just won yours in a single afternoon." I nodded, gathering my documents. "What happens now?" "Now? You go home, to your house which you keep. The paperwork processes through the system. In about 90 days, you'll be officially divorced." He extended his hand. "And you start over." As I drove back to the house, my house, I reflected on Bristol's parting expression. Not sadness or remorse, but something closer to shocked respect, as if she was finally seeing me clearly for the first time. After a decade of marriage, it had taken divorce proceedings for her to actually see me. In the driveway, I noticed Bristol's Lexus was gone, along with the Range Rover that belonged to Lawson. They'd apparently wasted no time collecting her things, and each other. I walked into the empty house, the silence both unfamiliar and welcome. On the kitchen counter sat Bristol's house key and wedding ring. Beside them was a note in her handwriting. "I never thought you had it in you." I laughed, crumpled the note, and tossed it in the trash. "That made 2 of us. They say the best revenge is living well." "I say the best revenge is living well, while your ex-wife's personal trainer boyfriend moves into her significantly downgraded apartment and discovers she expects the same level of maid service she had during our marriage. It's been 6 months since the divorce was finalized, and Minnesota has cycled through winter into the tentative warmth of spring. The snow has melted, revealing not just dormant grass, but a new version of myself I didn't know existed. The guys from poker night have taken to calling me the sleeper cell, a seemingly harmless IT manager who activated into a strategic mastermind when provoked. Troy even made me a t-shirt with the nickname printed across the chest. I only wear it to poker nights, but still, it's nice to be appreciated for your hidden talents. Last week, Meredith stopped by my office with news she couldn't resist delivering in person. "Bristol's brother Nash lost his real estate license," she announced, dropping into the chair across from my desk. Apparently, some anonymous tip to the board included documentation of his attempt to manipulate property documents during your refinancing. "Anonymous, huh?" I sipped my coffee innocently. "The world is full of mysteries. Harold's fingerprints are all over this," she laughed. "That man holds grudges like they're Olympic medals." She wasn't wrong. Harold had taken Bristol and Nash's scheme personally, viewing it as an affront to the legal system he'd dedicated his life to. The man might wear bow ties from the 1950s, but his approach to justice was timeless, swift and merciless. Speaking of Bristol, her social media transformation has been fascinating to observe from a safe distance. Gone are the workout selfies with Lawson, replaced by inspirational quotes about finding yourself and letting go of toxicity. The toxicity in question presumably being me, not the multiple affairs or attempted financial sabotage. According to mutual acquaintances who still communicate with both of us, an increasingly small circle, Bristol and Lawson's relationship imploded spectacularly just 8 weeks after our divorce. Apparently, Lawson was also providing personal training to 3 other married clients, using the same romantic playbook he'd deployed with Bristol. The man was nothing if not efficient with his methodology. I heard Bristol caught him with one of them in, ironically, the parking lot of Planet Fitness. Karma may move slowly, but she has impeccable comedic timing. As for me, the house feels different now. Bigger, certainly, but also more authentically mine. I've redecorated, replacing Bristol's aggressively neutral aesthetic with things I actually enjoy looking at. Turns out I have opinions about furniture and art that were dormant during 10 years of marriage. My living room now features comfortable seating instead of Instagram-worthy discomfort, and the kitchen contains appliances I actually use rather than status symbols gathering dust. The changes extend beyond home decor. I've discovered I enjoy hiking the trails around Minneapolis, something Bristol dismissed as walking in dirt. I've taken cooking classes, joined a local tech meetup group, and even tried rock climbing with the guys from work. None of these activities involve pretending to be someone I'm not, which feels like the most luxurious freedom imaginable. Last month, I received a text from Bristol, the first direct communication since the divorce. I hope you're happy with yourself. After careful consideration, I replied with complete honesty, I am, for the first time in years. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. We'd said all that needed saying in that conference room 6 months ago. People often ask if I'm bitter about the 10 years I spent in a marriage that ended so spectacularly. The truth is more complicated than a simple yes or no. Those years taught me valuable lessons. How to recognize deception, how to maintain dignity under pressure, how to plan methodically when emotions are running high. Most importantly, they taught me that being underestimated can be a superpower if you use it correctly. Bristol underestimated my awareness, my intelligence, and my resolve. She mistook kindness for weakness, patience for passivity. In doing so, she created the perfect conditions for her own downfall, a masterclass in self-sabotage disguised as superiority. Yesterday, as I was leaving the office, my boss casually mentioned that the department director position would be opening up next quarter. You should apply, Mitchell, he said. After watching how you handled that system migration crisis last month, I think you've got what it takes. 5 years ago, I would have dismissed the suggestion, believing the executive suite was for people unlike me, louder, more aggressive, more naturally commanding. Now I recognize that quiet competence and strategic thinking have their own power. Sometimes the most effective person in the room isn't the one making the most noise. So yes, I'll be applying for that director position. And yes, I've started dating again, cautiously, honestly, with the wisdom that only comes from having survived a relationship with someone who could qualify for the Olympics in gaslighting. As for Bristol, I genuinely hope she finds whatever she's looking for, preferably far away from me, my finances, and anyone else I care about. They say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I'd modify that slightly. What doesn't kill you makes you smarter, more resilient, and occasionally, when the situation demands it, a bit more calculating than anyone expects. Some might call it cynical. I call it growth. And in the end, that's the best revenge of all.